Okay, welcome in everyone. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. So today, this is a little bit different. So this is actually going to be an episode that will be streamed live on the Dr. Des Show, my podcast. So if you are not following my podcast, make sure that you all follow it, the Dr. Des Show. It's on YouTube. It is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of those platforms. So I am super excited to have you all here today. As we go along, make sure that if you do have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat because we will be answering all of your questions as we go along. But today we're talking all about data storytelling. So, data can inform so many decisions. However, as public health professionals, one of the things me and Dr. Bryant was just talking about when we were before we went live was that we are not public health practitioners. We are not utilizing data like we should, right? Data can tell so many stories and it can get you so much money, right? So today we want to really talk about the impact that we can make with data, how we can secure more funding with that, and how Zenobia is really doing that in this space. So I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Zenobia Bryant Antoine, and she is the founder, CEO of Black Health, Black Wealth, where she helps organizations basically be impactful with their data. So, Dr. Zenobia, thank you so much for joining us
Mhm.
today. And can you just kind of tell us a little bit about how you translate data into impact and then what really first drew you into data storytelling and really kind of, I know it's a loaded question, but really kind of how how it evolved into your consulting business that you have now?
Yeah, so full disclosure, y'all, what y'all see is what you get. So I'm gonna be very transparent. What happened was starting with the data storytelling and how it transformed into my business. It really was because in the CEO club, we were talking about your like niche offer. And that's how I was like, oh, this is really like what I do across the board. And so I sat down and was like, how would I explicitly explain what I do? And data storytelling was born. And what that simply means is taking the data that we use to drive the decisions and adding a story to it. And I'm not talking about just sitting down and making up a fairy tale, but really it's adding narrative to the data points. So my background in public health, I have a concentration in epidemiology. And I remember in school, it was quantitative or qualitative. And you were either on one side or the other. And for us in our program, actually, they didn't even encourage mixed methods, which is when you do both the quantitative and the qualitative. So I spent a lot of time looking at numbers and statistics. But then I remember being like, but what does this mean? Like, why does it matter? And this is early on in school. And I always say I'm a numbers person. I do. This is true. I love numbers. I have a spreadsheet for just about everything. Y'all, my husband is probably sick of me because I do. I keep spreadsheets for everything. But I love numbers. But as I started working in public health more, I realized that there was something missing. Um, and so that's kind of where it was birthed. Is like, how do we tell use the data, right, to tell the story of the communities that we serve, to highlight their voices and not eliminate them, because a lot of times, and um so one of the statistics, I don't know why this is in my mind, probably because I was reading about it earlier, but the maternal morbidity and mortality, a lot of times we'll read, oh, Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than their counterparts. That's great. That is a statistic, but what does that really mean? And how do you tell that story without placing the blame back on the community that's impacted? And so one of those ways to do that is to really bring in real life stories um, and attach it to the data so that you really drive home the narrative that behind the numbers, because the numbers are important, but behind the numbers sit real people. Behind the numbers sit actual stories. So, but how did I get here? I back in 2020, and I say this all the time, before that, public health found me in general. I was wholeheartedly, you couldn't tell me otherwise in my very young, naive age that I was going to be a pediatrician. I was pre med, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards, applied to med school, did all of it. It didn't work out. But public health found me because a friend saw that I was struggling at the time, basically with my identity. Because when something you work so hard for falls apart and you have attached your identity to that from a very early age, I'm very type A. I'm a planner. And so I knew in elementary school what I wanted to do for my career. So now you take that, and I've been working toward it like, middle school, top of my class in high school, volunteering at the hospital, shadowing my pediatrician. I'm a different breed. I know. Like, who does that? And it's like, who actively seeks out stuff like that as a child? But I say that to say, I did all that work. And when it did not happen, I'm like, well, what do I do now? Because this is all I've worked for. And so a family friend who's a few years older than me, she was studying public health, and she said, I really think you should look into it because I think it would be a great fit. And y'all, it has been the best decision of my life. Like, I hands down love it here. Even in the chaos and the turmoil we sometimes find ourselves in, it really makes a difference for me because oftentimes reminded this is how I serve my community. So in 2020, I had a government job and was let go. That's a whole nother story. But at the time, I was talking to my brother and, just discussing like what am I gonna do, blah, blah, blah. And he said something to me that really struck me. He said, you're too talented and skilled to keep giving your talents and skills away. Like you when we talk about legacy, because we were also talking about legacy, he said, what are you leaving behind? Because as you've seen, God forbid they let you go, your name ain't attached to that work. They'll even if you did author it, they can it's their property. They can take your name off and add somebody else's. What you gonna do? Very real talk, right? It's also very hard to hear. And so when I really started looking at my skill set, and when I did, there were a couple of things that stood out, especially with a public health background. Data analysis, but also, again, I told you I'm a weird breed. I love literature reviews. So I was like, how can I take this and really market it? And honestly, starting Black Health, Black Wealth was a step out on faith because I had no idea what I was doing. Sometimes I still don't know what I'm doing. But it was really me starting something that supported my morals and values, and I could really build to leave a legacy and serve my community. And so I'm saying all that to say that this year, coming into this year, one of the things I knew I needed was a rebrand. So I started the rebrand. And as I was rebranding, I began to look at the past work I've done, the current contracts I had at the time. And I was like, the thing that sticks out is people keep calling me for this data. It could start with the literature review, but then we'll get into the data, and it's like I'm I saw myself instructing them on how to communicate it, right? Um, so that's why I was like, well, we're really using data to tell the story. It could be if you're applying for a grant, you're highlighting the gap in what your program does, but you want to tell the story. So there's so many examples I could give, but that's really where it came from is how taking what we have, which is the powers in the data, and being able to leverage it across multiple avenues. It could be for your funders, your stakeholders, internally, right? Sometimes organizations have internal data that they don't know how to leverage to really drive change internally. And I've probably lost the question at this point. This is what happens when I start talking. But it that's where it came from. Just me paying attention to what I kept getting called to do. And it was about the data and how to not just collect the data, but how to collect the right data, which starts with surveys and how even you develop your survey question, how you ask a specific question to your target community. Because depending on your target audience, you can ask the same question multiple different ways to meet them where they are.
Zenobia, listen, you have. Friend, you have said so. I'm over here taking notes while you're talking, and I'm just like, okay, and then you done drop some gems on us. You say you're too talented and skilled to keep giving away that stuff for free. That's a quote right there, bars. Like, I'm just like, okay, okay, I love this. And I want to like just go back to some of the things that you said. So, number one, you talked about Zenobia is a part of our CEO Circle. So CEO Circle is our community. If you're in the Public Health Club, I know some people here may not be in the Public Health Club, but if you're in the Public Health Club, it's pretty similar to the Public Health Club, but it's straight for entrepreneurs. It only opens once out of the year, so it'll open again around in January. So if you do want to join, definitely check it out when it opens. But we do all things entrepreneur. One of the things was kind of determining what that niche offer is that you really offer, that you want to be known for. And I love that that helped you to get to this data storytelling, because I can literally hear in your voice the passion about just this data storytelling, and how, like you said, public health found you, and you really found your lane in public health. And I think it's so amazing and just so important. And I want to also talk about too, you know, you mentioned you mentioned wanting to be a pediatrician, and I think I had told the story before, but I wanted to be a pediatrician too, like literally since I was a little tiny kid. So, and then I had that similar experience of like I like was a medical assistant, like I worked for a family practice doctor because like I wanted to shadow. This is while I was in undergrad, because I wanted to like shadow and get all the stuff. Like I took a practice MCAT, like I was gonna apply for med school. And then I just realized I don't think this is what I want to do. Like breaking down, crying in the parking lot at school. Like I don't know what I want to do with my life. Whole crisis in undergrad for me. But, and again, I only did public health because I thought it would look good on a medical school application. Only reason. And I fell in love with it. And now I did not fall in love with the data. But 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 I did enjoy what the data gave us, right? I enjoy implementing like the programs and being able to make those data driven decisions. So I really love that you shared that part of your story and your journey to how you got here to building your organization and creating Black Health, Black Wealth, because I feel like you do such impactful work, and it wouldn't have happened if you would have went to med school. We wouldn't have you here. So so I'm grateful that you're here. And I know that, so I just mentioned like data driven decisions. I feel like that's the thing that they really kind of hone into us in school, or at least they did for me in school. Like we want to always like develop our programs based on the data. We want to look at the data and see what the data is telling us. Now, in public health, a lot of times our data is old and outdated, but that's a whole nother story. you know but we do the best that we can with what we got. So can you really kind of talk to us and really break it down? You already kind of started with it, but break down like the difference in making data driven decisions versus making data informed narratives, and how you take like literature reviews and how you take stories and utilize that in the data. Can you really kind of give us the difference in what that is and how and what makes it so powerful?
Yeah, so one example I use, and this is very real. A few years ago, I was actually asked to give a keynote address on. I have a published paper on I can't even remember the full title, but it's the impact of implicit bias on maternal morbidity and mortality. And from that paper, I was asked to give a keynote on that topic. And so, initially I sat down preparing the keynote because it was to a group of, it was a nursing school program, and it was a lot of nurse practitioners in the room. And so I sat down, I was like, oh, great, I get to pull out the statistics, this was my thing. Like, yeah, of course, two things I'm passionate about: my community, what impacts my community, and the statistics. And, I was getting ready to talk about the structural racism and institutional racism and how that leads to implicit biases and all that. But in the midst of preparing for that keynote, y'all, I had peer review journals. I told y'all I'm a nerd, so I'm a little old school, so I had to print it out too. I had my paper, my printed out, my prints out was highlighting. I was in it. I was in the zone. And as I'm thinking about it though, and I'm pulling my slides together, I was like, but what does this mean for other people, right? I'm passionate about it. I get it, but how do I really drive this home to a group of nurse practitioners who may or may not fully understand the statistics behind it. And a few years prior to this speaking engagement, I actually had a really close friend, the same one who introduced me to public health. She came very, very close to losing her life in childbirth. Um, so of course I'm preparing for this. I'm like, man, this is like hitting a little home, a little close to home. And something was like, tie the two together. So I kept a lot of the statistics, but then I went to um, news articles that, they've been publishing a lot of news articles with real stories about people either losing their life. One of a black judge, her daughter, this a few years ago, had passed in childbirth. There were stories about like Serena Williams, like very well-known people who were close to a major medical crisis from childbirth. And I'm an avid reader. Another area my husband is sick of me because I keep books. I keep books everywhere. So I have books on it. So I went to these, I was pulling out very real case studies, real stories to tie um the two together. Because I realized I can get up there and as someone who loves data, does data, I could say all this, but how do I really drive home the fact that something needs to change? How do I use it for the story as a mirror and a microphone to really drive home like, hey, something's got to change. We got to do something, be it policy, be it training programs within the schools. And that's really where it started, honestly. It came from that because delivering that address and being able to tie the two together, I could see in very real time how, the realization was occurring. Oh my God, like when you add the two together, it connects the numbers to the stories. So now, after I share like a statistics about, black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth compared to their counterparts, then I pull up a very real news story with a picture, or something like that. It ties the two together. So a lot of times, again, like she mentioned in school, they drive home the data. And even for us in our program, my program, mixed methods was, if people did it, they were considered just the outlanders. Like and they told us when you're doing your dissertation, you pick something that can get you in and out. And so it was even the narrative was mixed methods is not important. You don't need it. But I realized what I did with that presentation was mixed methods because I combined the quantitative and the qualitative. And in that moment, it was like an unlearning of the very colonized instructions that we get sometimes in school. It's like, how, as connected to my community as I am, can I sit up here and say storytelling is not important when that's literally how our ancestors communicated? Storytelling is a very big deal in the Black and Brown communities generations ago. That's how they passed down information. That's how, you, for me, I'm a Southern girl through and through. So I can remember sitting with my grandmothers, them telling stories of what they experienced when they were growing up, or even down to recipes. Like I know recipes now that were not written down, but I know them because they were told to me in a story. So that's how it really I that was my example because I that was the time I was like, oh my God, this is why it's important because a lot of times when you just pull the data out, you lose a lot of the what's needed. It's putting a data point out there again, like black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth is the what's wrong. Adding the story can tie it to, okay, this is what's wrong, but this is also what's needed. And it helps funders and policymakers and practitioners see the possibilities, not just what's wrong. It ensures the people behind the data are not just subjects, but their voices are intertwined and they help move the needle towards positive change.
I love that. And one of the things I just wrote down as you were talking, like it made me think about how a lot of times those numbers, the data that we see, Black women are 3 times more likely to die. It doesn't hit home for a lot of people until it happens to someone they know. So
Mm-hmm.
now they have a very real story that makes it really real to them beyond just this being a number. And I think Dr. Shanae said in the chat, humanizing the data. Yeah, humanizing data. I love that. And I wanted to also kind of talking about too in the mixed methods area of what we were just talking about. I did mixed methods for my dissertation. Now, did I want to do mixed methods? No. But here's the thing. I had huge ideas as a student, and I was like, oh, we can do a survey. I can analyze that data. Then I can do a focus group and da da da. I told my advisor that's what I was doing, and she remembered that that's what I said. I tried to get away with only doing a survey. Literally, it was probably like 3 weeks or so, 3 to 4 weeks before I defended. And she was like, Desiree, didn't you say you were doing a focus group? I said, I said, I mean, yeah, but we ain't gotta do that. She was like, do the focus group, do it now. So in 4 weeks, I'm like scrambling to do focus groups. Now I did them. It worked out great. Like I got the people, we did it. It was amazing. And I think that turned out to be my favorite part of my dissertation. And I was able to take what I got from the survey. So all the information and things that I got from the survey, develop questions for the focus group so I could dive deeper into things that I thought were interesting, and then able to hear these real discussions and conversations and ask questions. And I was like, wow, like this is context that I would not have gotten if I didn't actually hear their perspectives and hear their stories and stuff. So I feel like you said, like this mixed methods approach, like for my advisor, she definitely reinforced us doing that because I wasn't epi, I was behavioral health and health education. But my epi friends, of course, like they were more quant, like you got to do the quantitative side. We don't care about no focus groups. So I think that's big to really be able to take that and to do that. So I want to go ahead and I want to kind of shift, and also people in the room, if you have any questions for Zenobia, please like place them in the chat as we're going along. But for when working with like nonprofits, foundations, or even like state government organizations, what are some common mistakes that you see when they try to communicate their data? And how do you help organizations like really shift from numbers to narrative?
Yeah, so it's funny that you share that story because I did the quite opposite with my committee. I ain't tell them nothing. Our structure was we were supposed to submit chapter by chapter for approval, as you write the dissertation. Y'all, I was so done. I wrote the first three chapters and sent it to them. And I was like, what's the worst that can happen? So that's why I was like, no, because if I tell you chapter by chapter, you're gonna have me in chapter one for 3 months and I'm not trying
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yes, somebody said we get ourselves in trouble. And I learned that very quickly. I'm not. But for as an epidemiologist, though, they told us we could not do, and I get it, but I feel like we missed out on a lot not even being able to delve into qualitative because it does add a certain richness to the quantitative aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings me to your question about what do I see with nonprofits and different organizations, and one of them is data without context. Y'all, I have sat in so many rooms and looked at these beautiful presentations, and it's useless because I'm like, y'all just throwing numbers up there and adding some fun colors. They don't mean anything because you haven't given us context, right? So what that means is numbers are often shared in isolation. Like you share 85 or 45% of respondents said this, okay, but what about the rest of your respondents? Give us some context into um, what that means for the audience. And they don't explain why they matter or who is even represented in the data, the raw numbers. Another thing, so what I do help organizations do is help them pair the data with quotes or case studies or something that helps bring the context, right? So, an example is I help my local health department do a internal health equity assessment But part of it was we didn't just survey the internal staff. We also surveyed and talked to the community partners so that we could see, like, even if the staff says, "Oh, I have a great working relationship with my community partners," what do the community partners say from their perspective, and pair it side by side. So that adds a different layer of context. Also, organizations overwhelmed with metrics. Like they try to list every possible statistic, but miss out on a lot of times less is more. So if you know your target audience, even though you have this robust set of data, what really is your audience most interested in? So if you're doing a grant application for a mentorship program, they're going to be interested most in what pieces of data drive home the gap you're feeling, right? So pick out the few that say, we noticed this gap in our community. This is what our program does. And these are the, quick quotes or um, reviews from people who have gone through our program. And this is how that's made a difference. It's a quick story you can tell, but those pieces of data you've chosen are very impactful without going through 15 pages. We done asked every question under the sun, and here are all the percentages and all the bar graphs. They don't know what that is half the time, nor do they really have the time to shift through it. Um, so we focus, that's one of the things that's called strategic storytelling, is choosing the most meaningful data points and aligning them with the mission and your end goal. Um, and telling the stories without data, because unfortunately, as much as the stories add the context, you do need some kind of data points, and there are very different ways you can get that, right? So if you have a program again and you do an evaluation, you can create the open-ended questions. You can create those questions to be where they have to, like, strongly agree, strongly disagree, like a Likert scale, and you can combine the two. Then you can give them a little open-ended, and now you have quantitative and qualitative from one program evaluation form. Um, and it's also knowing your target audience. So the way you present data to your community partners, you're going to use a little bit of different language than you would to maybe the other organizations or funders, right? Because your funders may very well understand what it means when you say this is statistically significant. But if you're speaking to your community partners, what does that mean to them? Something as simple as says, this is important and it matters and this is why it matters, without using the jargon of statistically significant.
I love that. And I know we had a couple of people in the chat. So Carly had made a comment. She said she's seen too much data that is mostly collected and analyzed based on funder requirements without taking the extra step to gather info that the program needs. And I've seen that a lot too. Unfortunately, it's just like they are at the whim of the funders. So if they have, like, limited budget, then they of course got to prioritize what the people who are going to give them money wants. Have you ever seen that in Zenobia, and how do you kind of work with organizations to really kind of combat that?
It it is what it is, right? Like that, I mean, that's a very real thing. You have to give the funders what they want. But again, being able to, sometimes if you write and I'm using like a program or a session evaluation because that's the example I started with. But if you ask the question in the right way, depending on what it is about, you can pull two separate pieces of information from one question.
Mm.
So there is a way to give the funders what they want and also gather the info that the program needs. It's gonna take a little finagling. It's gonna, you might have to sit down, pull some heads together, chat GPT a few questions, say, okay, and I throw in chat GPT, but don't just rely solely on it because it will be wrong. So, but it is a good starting point sometimes to figure out what's the best way I can ask this question. And a lot of times, too, you can sit down and plan it out and come, like, say, this is the question, these are the possible responses, and kind of loosely pinpoint, like, okay, if I ask this question with these responses, how many different ways can we use the possible data that we would get from it before even deploying it. So it takes a little bit of time and planning on the back end, but that is one workaround. Is the starting with I I call it working your way backwards sometimes, starting with the end and then kind of going through the different possibilities backwards so that you want to meet the please meet the funders requirements because we want y'all to keep y'all money, but also get what you need to make the proper adjustments internally.
Hmm. I love that. And I think I've even seen sometimes where funders don't even want much sometimes. Like sometimes they just want like three numbers. And like how many people attended this? Like what like they just want a few numbers and they're good. Like that's it. So I definitely think that being able to come into a program or with an organization and being able to give them that broader perspective is always amazing. Dr. Shanae asked a question. She said, "Do you find that organizations struggle with identifying metrics that matter for their mission?"
Yes. Uh, that's the simple answer. Is because and I get it. Like people, sometimes data is daunting. So they know they need a program. They're running a program. They may have done the pre-survey and then they're going to do a post-survey. But it really takes time. You really have to take time to sit down and say, okay, this is our mission. This is the goal that we have for this said program. What pieces of information do we want to gain when we ask these questions? Um, and it really starts with don't wait till the program has started to say, oh, we need to do evaluation. Tie that in into the planning because that's where you get your real data from it is tying it in into the planning in the beginning so you can understand like this is how the program is structured, this is what we're going to do, um, but what metrics are we going to measure and how does that support our why? Now I hope I'm answering the question
No,
and
you are. That
chime
was
in.
good. No, that was good. We'll go over to Dr. Leia's questions now. And if you all have any follow-up questions, please type them in the chat. I also just dropped in the chat Zenobia's newsletter. So if you all want to stay up to date with Black Health, Black Wealth, all the different things that her organization is doing, different strategies, tips, all the things that she provides, please make sure that you sign up for her newsletter. So Dr. Leia, her first question, she asked, what strategies have helped the most for quant storytelling and graph design?
So well, graph design, I recently, not recently, but I use Canva a lot because I found out there's so many different things you can do with Canva. Um, again, you can do Excel, PowerPoint, but we've all, that's more common. But there's Canva. Canva also has this, I guess you would call it a secondary one called Flourish, where you can actually make more interactive graphs. And Canva also has um, something on the back end where they have like they have tutorials. They will walk you through. They have like different classes. It's almost like I can't think of what it was called at the like master class or whatever, but it's on Canva and there's different classes, if you just want to say I need to figure out how to make this graph interactive. There's one specific one for that you could watch and walk through. Flourish does the same thing. I've actually started signing up for um, I don't even know how I found this, but Canva does have a newsletter. So now they're telling me like, hey, we're having this webinar on they actually did one on data storytelling recently. And I was like, hey, I'm in there. Let me see what y'all talking about. Um, so that's like the one for the making the graphics and the visuals. And I say a lot of times we put ourselves in a box, so be creative, right? When I was working on um I was working with the coalition out in my where I live, a Black Health Equity Coalition, and we had done a community survey. And so when I was designing, we were talking about the best way to depict the data. I said, let's not do bar graphs. If we're talking about 25%, let's do people. And you could say 1 in 4 and depict that this is what it means for what 1 in 4 looks like. Or so I was giving a talk a few weeks ago and I had a statistic and I said 25% and I could see in the room, they were like, okay, that's cute. That's it. I got a visual for y'all. I was co-facilitating, so me and the co-facilitator were already standing, and I had two other people stand up. And I said 25% means one out of the four of us standing. And if you look around, you see there are more than four people in this room. So different ways to kind of drive home the data points. Will it take a little bit of studying on your part to figure it out? Yes, but that's what we do. Like that's what I do. So if you don't want to do the studying, come to me, for a little bit of coins, I can help you. But it's really being creative with that. And then I think you asked about the data storytelling. It's I use what I call a bridge method that I'm actually in the process of developing, so that as a framework for to help other people who need it. But it's the bridge method, and so I call it the bridge method because the gap is what's under the bridge. What like the river. If you picture a river, whitewater rapids, these are the issues or situations that your target audience is facing. You start with that, and it's like, okay, the bridge is what am I implementing? What are we doing? How are we solving? How are we getting people over the barriers? And then the arrival is when they get to the other side, what impact have we made? And you put that together, it tells a full story, and you pull in the numbers. So you could say, um, you know, 90, and this is very fake one. I'm pulling it off the top of my head, but 80% of Black and brown women in the STEM field say they lack mentors and they are struggling to um, make it through their programs. That's the gap. Okay, so I created Legacy Leaders. Now, this is my very real program, and it's a mentoring program for Black women in the STEM fields and public health, and we help guide them through holistically so that they have a mentor, someone that a touch point to help them identify and just move through spaces that weren't created for them. That's the bridge. And then hear from one of our former mentees, Faith, who says that being a part of the program helped really ground her while she was in her neuroscience program, and it helped her to see herself in a holistic view and not just via her GPA. That's very rough draft, but that's an example of how I use the bridge model to kind of make sure it's tying in the whole picture, using the data and qualitative and the quantitative, putting it together to tell a very real story.
Nice. And Dr. Leah raised her hand. You want to come from
Hmm.
you?
Oh, I was just gonna say brava, Dr. Zenobia. That was amazing. I also think it has that model and definitely get it trademarked. That model also is so great for RFPs, grant, like there's so many homes that can go to. But yeah, that is really, really helpful. And I'm still thinking over the Canva piece. I think that's awesome too.
Nice. I love it. Yeah, I love Canva too. And I feel like I get those emails too, Zenobia, about like the classes that they do. And I'm always like, oh, I want to do one, but then I don't ever have the time. So I do want to make it a priority to do them. But I know like it's so many things that we can do with Canva. And it barely scratches the surface of how I use it. But I know it's so much more. And someone actually mentioned in the chat that you might need to do a Canva class in the public health club.
Hey, I will, because I play in Canva all the time. But that's because as an entrepreneur, I wear all the hats. So I'm like,
Hmm.
I need to figure out I mentioned doing the report for the local health department here. I did the whole report in Canva, and y'all, it was 100 pages plus. So that's just where it came from because I was like, I got to give them an output. And I don't have the funds right now for a graphic designer. So Zenobia gonna have to be the graphic designer today.
Yeah, and I've even seen organizations like they put out RFPs for people to design reports. So that is very common. I've seen that a lot of times. Like they just need someone to come in and like put the designing touches on their report. And now, with things like Canva, we can definitely like make it easier, but you of course got to have that visual eye to like to know aesthetically what they want, what they need, and of course thinking about who is this report for, the actual audience. So I'm gonna go down. I think we had some more questions. Let's see. So Simone said, with data storytelling, any insight on how to gather critical information from community members while making sure it feels mutually beneficial for them. Some projects I've worked on have had restrictions on incentives that I believe causes low participation in gathering qualitative data.
Facts. And it drives me insane when these organizations want to come in and they like, oh, we want to survey the community, but we're not going to give them incentives.
Mhm.
So sometimes, depending on your budget and what the limitations are on incentives, I still work with them, but when we were actively doing the survey for the Black Health Equity Coalition in in my local community, we did not have the funds to say, hey, everybody who participates is going to get a gift card. But what we did say is if you participate, return your survey, um, we'll put you in a raffle to get, and there was a certain amount of gift cards. It might have been gas, Amazon, some stuff like that. But being creative with how you market the incentive, you may not be able to give it to everybody, but you'll be surprised how many people will even just do it just for the chance of a gift card. And then don't be, if you can, because I know that sometimes, depending on who you're working with or for, there may be certain disclosure agreements in place. But like for the coalition, because we are Black women business owners who started this coalition to serve our community specifically as a nonprofit, we were upfront like, hey, the reason we're doing this survey is because there has been no survey specifically for the Black community in um, our location. Now we have all this data, but with this all the data that we have, like the community profiles, et cetera, it combines everybody's data into one. So we were specific about our target audience. We took surveys from everybody, but we were really looking at, the Black community. And we're doing this survey because we are assessing what you need the most so we can serve you in the areas that you need the most. We
Mhm.
don't want to guess because what our needs are could be completely different from the community at large. So being upfront about why you're collecting this data, how it will benefit them also helps. And then it just is, I know is a nuanced thing because yes, I agree. The low no incentives causes a low participation. And
Mhm.
sometimes specifically for like um our coalition, it was the very first survey. So I was talking to the board members, I was like, y'all got to understand is that sometimes you got to do it once to get your name out there, and whatever you get is still valuable data. Your response rate may not be as high as you wanted it to be, but your name is out there. And once they see you and you hold and you build that relationship of trust, the next time we come around to do it again, then there's a level of trust and they'll be more likely, more willing to participate. So sometimes you got to be in it for the long haul. Like not just collecting the data one time and being like, we got what we need, peace, but really join up in partnership with your target audience and building that relationship. A lot of times we forget that part is the relationship part and including them in the process.
Yeah, I love that. And Dr. Leah?
Yeah, I was just gonna echo that piece about playing the long game and having that exposure in the community. When I lived in Jacksonville, I worked for a mental health clinic, and we were going through the same issue, like low response rate. People just weren't taking the surveys. We started doing health fairs, back to school drives, getting into the community, and it just like shot up like
Mhm.
drastically. And then something we also did, and I still do now, and I try to advocate is keeping the community involved post research. So
Mhm.
it's not like we do the data, we say goodbye, but even doing a share out with a few community folks, having them check your data. Hey, this is what our conclusions. Are we yay? Are we nay? I think sometimes we collect the data, we do good work, and then it's like we just never see the folks again.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep. And somebody put in the chat community-based participatory research.
Mhm.
Yep, exactly that. And so Dr. Shanae had a question, which actually aligns with my next question that I was going to ask you. So Dr. Shanae, she's in my subcontracting to six figures course right now. She's building her consultancy focused on helping organizations with their impact data. Do you have any tips for those who are interested in this type of work, like getting clients, any challenges you faced so far, etc.?
Oh my God, that might be a whole nother session. But one, I think I've when that works for me is y'all might not believe this from this session, but I am very much an introvert. So I one of the things I to do is I challenge myself, and I started this about a few years ago. My community here, we have a annual block party put on by another community organization, and they invite businesses to come in and have tables, etc. And one year I challenged myself and said, I'm going to go, I'm going to set up me a little table. This is, very early on, and just practice talking to people. Practice pitching your business, practice pitching it in different situations. And honestly, it has not been yet. I know there's a lot on, and please, do your social media posts, drive your engagement that way, but it really comes from just sitting down talking to people and networking. And then when I do schedule a call, and I call it a discovery call because consultations for me cost money. But a discovery call is for me just to sit down and, hear about which the other person's work and share about my work. But I also come prepared with, I have done my research. So I've gone on their business webpage and I said, okay, now um, if I were to partner with them and do a data storytelling, a paid contract for data storytelling, what are some things I would pitch? Now, this is why it's in the discovery call because it could be a number of things and you don't really know their needs. But I
Mhm.
come in knowing a little bit about their programs, knowing about their target audience, and saying, hey, I see you have these programs that help students with, manage their emotions. How are you collecting do you have program evaluations? And this
Mhm.
is a very real scenario that happened. And she was like, we've been struggling with that. And I was like, well, this is what I would do. If you have these questions and you collect them, she's like, yeah, I try to get people to submit input and feedback, but they're hesitant. I said, well, are you the one that's asking them? And she was like, yeah. I said, well, they're not going to because you own the business. They're not going to tell you. If you pull somebody else in, like me, they don't know me. So, but this is a way to just come in prepared. And it's not going to be an overnight thing. A lot of times we get into these things and we're like, oh, it's going to happen. We want it fast, but it really all of it is playing the long game
Mhm.
and just um, really honing in and believing in that this information. And this is something I struggle with too. Like there are times I'm sitting in the calls, I'm like, man, this woman gotta like I've been on their page, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, she got a whole team. I ain't got that many. She don't need my help. But then you get in the call and then they're eating it up. So even moving past that and just showing up, show up anyway, show up scared, show up when you're like, oh my God, I don't know how this is gonna work. But what you got to remember is every time, this is what I tell myself, even if nothing at that moment comes out of it, what you've done is you built your muscle. So you have practice getting in these discovery calls, explaining your expertise. You have practice fostering connections. And when you do that, most times people are like, you know what, I can't, I may not be able to use your services right now, but I think I know somebody who will. So I've had calls based off of referrals from one discovery call. And it's really just from the challenge is to continue to believe in yourself, even when you're like, I don't know, you know, I'm hesitant. I'm doubting myself, but continue to show up, and continue to practice. That's all it is. Like, I didn't get my business pitch down after one try, but it took fumbling through it. It took forgetting the words. It took all of that to be able to get to the point where I can now name it and explain it. And I still might stumble, but that's okay because next time I come around, I'm gonna have it. I'm like, okay, we're gonna reframe that, and I'm gonna get it right the next time.
I love that. And I always say, if you don't talk about your business, who will? Like nobody else is going to talk about your
Mhm.
business. You have to talk about your business. Like tell it to everybody. Don't be shy about it. Get it out there. And I love what you said, Nobia, about like you going actually to these events, to these things that are out there and really talking with people. And I always say too, like, a lot of organizations, they don't know that they need you a lot of times they don't even know what program evaluation is, or like what, data storytelling is, but they know something's missing. They know something's like hindering them for getting the results that they want. So if you were to come in and, like you said, I love that you strategically like ask like, oh, what are y'all doing for y'all program evaluation? And that started that conversation, so you can like learn what they're doing, and then you as the expert, you can come in and say, okay, here's what I would do. Here's what you probably should get started doing. You want to go ahead and pay me so I can do it for you? I do offer this service. Just thinking about that. And, if you all are attending things like, I know APHA is coming up. If you're going to like APHA or whatever conference you're going to, have it ready. Like she said, like you're not gonna get that pitch ready on the first try. Like you may not get it ready on the fourth or fifth try, but you're building that muscle. You're getting those reps in. That's what's so important. Like you getting those reps in and doing it, because it will 100% happen. And one of the strategies too is making sure that you're tuning into podcasts like this. You're tuning into like the Public Health Club. You're tuning into even others. Like I love listening to other types of like podcasts and different things like that to give me like a perspective on what's possible, because we don't always see what's possible if we're not in the rooms with people who are making things happen. So like this podcast I was listening to, this woman, she sold like wooden frames. I don't know, she sold something on Etsy, and she decided, like, she had like a corporate like marketing background, and like so she was in like corporate marketing and sales for the longest. So she decided to start a little Etsy store, and she made like I think she made like $40,000 in a month off of her Etsy store. And then she was like, oh, wow, like I got something here. And so then she said, I'm going to create a course because I have a marketing and sales background. I'm going to create a course for people to so show them how to sell on Etsy. She made like 10 million in a year. And she did that through kind of what you were saying, Zenobia, doing discovery calls with people. Like she had like a YouTube channel where she would talk about this stuff. And like she did, and I was like, that's crazy. Like, just to think about something like that. But again, like, we're not trying to sell Etsy stuff, but it's something to show us what's possible if we just do something and we stay consistent with it and keep going. So I love that. And I know we're almost near time. So if you all have any additional questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat as we're going along. So I do want to ask, and I want to mention too. So can you tell us a little bit about your newsletter that you have?
Yes. So now this is I knew with the rebrand, right? So I had a newsletter. I was quiet for 2 years. And so when I rebranded and restarted the newsletter, again, it's something we talked about in the CEO circle about, engaging your audience. I was like, I don't know, these people gonna care what I got to say now. But they do. And so the newsletter, I actually also have a blog on my website, but the newsletter just reiterate some of the information. Like the one that went out on they only come out twice a month unless there's something special going on. But for me, and the bandwidth I have, I'm gonna start out with twice a month, the first and the 15th. So this past one on the 15th actually talked about data storytelling, and it gave a little snippet of some of the I went into more detail in this conversation, but it was just a little snippet, a little framework on how to tie in data storytelling into your daily work. I highlight happenings that are, with the community partners that I have. So when I meet with people and we collaborate or partner up and they have events or whatever, that's in the newsletter. Um, and sometimes it's just me being vulnerable. Like the one that's coming out in November is going to be about rest and why I think it's important as a leadership skill. But it will definitely highlight things that are happening in the community. It'll highlight, you'll get some tips and pointers from me, a little bit more about my story and my background. And then you'll also be one of the first to know when different products are launching from the website. If I'm having a webinar, when I launch the toolkit or my data storytelling framework, that you'll be the first to know. So there are a lot
I
of different things. The mentoring program is relaunching. You guys will be the first to know about that.
Nice. I love that. So y'all, the link is in the chat. So make sure that you sign up. If you are listening to this like later on, like the link is probably down below in the show notes. So make sure that you go ahead and sign up for Zenobia's newsletter. And also, Zenobia, you offer like organizations like workshops as well as like consulting services too, right?
I do. I do it all, as a lot of us do. But yes, I do offer workshops and trainings. One of the things that actually ended up happening when I was working with the health department is they were like, "Oh, you collected the data, you did the report. Now come to our directors meeting and talk about it." And I was just like, "Really, y'all?" But yes, I do that, and I do it well.
Mhm.
I do it. I do it well. I don't
We
say
can tell.
nothing, but
We
I
can
do it
tell.
well.
We can tell. Nice. I love it. I love it so much. So just kind of, some last questions that I have here for you. What's next for you and Black Health, Black Wealth? Like what's kind of like, any maybe upcoming projects that you have that you're looking forward to or any goals that you have for your organization?
Yeah, so many. It's really loaded right now because um the rebrand really ignited a new passion in me.
Hmm.
But there's so many things. So I'm definitely working on developing and launching the I'll call it my data storytelling toolkit. So I understand that, funds ebb and flow. So maybe you just want to have, access to a few of the tools to help you get started. That's what the toolkit will do. Um, I'm very passionate about mentoring, so redeveloping and launching the mentoring program. I know somebody's probably listening like she got two sides of a business. I do. And I don't ask me why, but it's something that I'm passionate about. And every time I try to get away from it, it just comes back. And it really, I keep talking about being the bridge, but the mentoring program is the way I bridge from the current generation to the people coming behind me, making sure that they have the tools and access that I did not have. I went to Emory University and I was a neuroscience major. So I know what it's like to be in a historically white institution. I know what it's like to be the first in some rooms. Um, so that's another thing. And I think I said the two things. The two main things is the toolkit and relaunching the mentoring program, but also, constantly trying to build up my clientele, get some I'm interested in new projects. So um, I always have room for consultations. Anybody want to reach out? 48 hours, I'll give you a good discount on that price. But yeah, it's really just taking it to the next level and really my goal, my wholehearted desire is as I build a legacy is to really help and support my community, from organizations down to individuals.
Nice. I love that. I love that. And last question that I have for you. So, you're also part of, and we talked about it, the CEO circle that we have. So, how has really kind of being a part of the CEO circle, it launched this past summer. So, it just started this summer. But since you've been in it, how has that been a part of like your growth as a CEO?
Oh my God. How do I even put this into words? It transformed how I think. So, yeah, I was a CEO and I was a founder, but I was saying that I don't think I fully embodied what it meant to be an actual CEO. Um, and yeah, I don't have a large team, but even in that, there's still a certain way you can show up. You can market yourself, you can position yourself as a CEO. They don't need to know it might just be you, right? They don't need to know that 10 out of the 15 or 12 out of the 15 years of experience were for somebody else. That's still your experience.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, how you market and show up. But even down to how I think it was either September or October, I randomly was like, you know what? I'm gonna do something I've never done before. I'm gonna do a strategic plan. I sat down and did a whole strategic plan for my business through next year. Like 2026 is planned. I've never done that before. Down to like what the content of newsletters, blog posts, what do I want to see? Where do I want to position my business? Thinking ahead. Even down to the tools we get from reading. I be behind on the reading sometimes, but it's because I'm really intentional about taking it in and processing. And then the most important thing is that accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all, like having that people to be a sounding board, having to even listen to what other people may be struggling with, I'm like, yo, I know more than I think I do. Just because you're in the room and you start, it's one thing when you're in the weeds trying to develop your own signature program, but then you can listen to somebody else with that struggle and you hear it for them. So having that sounding board to be like, yo, this you said a whole lot, but this is what I hear you saying. This is really where you need to focus. So there's so many things I could say about the CEO. The best investment. And I'm a person, I don't invest lightly. I count my coins. And so even for the CEO, I think I filled out half the application. I was like, I don't know if it's worth it. And I had to circle back around. Every penny was worth it. Every penny was worth it.
Yes, I'm like, I don't do anything where it's gonna be like halfway. Like, I'm gonna make sure you got what you need. We're gonna do surveys so I can make sure, like, okay, they said they need this. Let's go ahead and add this here. Let's get this person here. So I love it. And I think too, like this year was me really saying, okay, I'm stepping into my CEO identity and I'm going to continue being the visionary because we have to like at some point in the business, we have to go from being like an employer and working in our business all the time to being that CEO of our business. And it's not a transition that happens overnight. It's something that people take years and years and years and years and years to do. But it's something that I'm like, I'm very intentional because I cannot wear all the hats all the time.
Mhm.
So I need to set up these systems, these processes. Like I need these things in place so I can go on and try to live my best life a little bit. So, but Zenobia, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Like you gave so much information. You gave us so much thoughts about just so many different things about our consulting businesses, about just how do we utilize data, and just different things like that. So I know if you all want to get in touch with her, blackhealthblackwealth.com. Make
Mhm.
sure that you check out her website. Make sure that you are .org. It's blackhealthblackwealth.org,
Yes, .org. Yeah, this is what
right?
happens when it's the end of the day. You be saying yes to everything. Hmm.
.org. Yeah. So I'll make sure that people who are listening like on the podcast or whatever, I've dropped it in the links below. But book a consultation with her. Like if you have an organization like that could use like some of her services, make sure that you book. Like now you know somebody, you're like, oh, I know somebody that can help us turn this around. So make sure that you book with her. But thank you again, Zenobia, and thank you everyone for coming and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Bye, everyone.